Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. My name is Chris Souza. I'm head of marketing here at Provus. We are really excited today because we get to talk about something very near and dear to our hearts, and that is scaling lead-to-cash operations for professional services organizations. And I don't think we could have brought together any better speakers than the two gentlemen joining us today. Before I introduce them, let's go through the standard webinar housekeeping. First and foremost, this is being recorded. So if you want a copy, this is going to be really great content. These men are absolutely intelligent geniuses. You're going to want to keep it for yourself. You're going to want to rewatch it. You're going to want to forward it to your colleagues. We will share a copy with you by email, or you'll be able to download it on provusinc.com. Also, this is meant to be an interactive conversation. If you have a question throughout the course of the webinar, please feel free to add them in the Q&A section, the menu bar at the bottom of your screen, and we'll either get to them during the course of the webinar or near the end. If we can't get to everything, we'll respond to you in kind afterwards. All right. So before we get to our two speakers, we want to introduce you to both Provus and NetSuite Open Air. So if you're not familiar with Provus, we are an AI-led services quoting platform, purpose-built for services organizations. With Provus, services organizations are dropping their quoting spreadsheets in exchange for a platform that empowers teams to maximize revenue, optimize margins, and introduce significant sales process efficiencies through process and data automation. Provus has been an SDN partner of NetSuite for 2 years and have both our integrations with OpenAir and Suite projects listed on the Suite app. And I'm going to kick it over to Joe so he can introduce Oracle NetSuite OpenAir.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Good morning, everybody. This is Joe Longo. I'm part of NetSuite. I'm the PSA principal at NetSuite. And one of the things that we're famous for is NetSuite Open Air, the leading PSA solution. It's been around for a while. I actually adopted it back in 2001. And you can see it's one of the enterprise class PSA solutions. We have customers with thousands of users on there, all running at the same time. It's unified with NetSuite ERP, so all the data is bi-directional, there's no integration, and it's the right tool for analytics for any corporation. So glad to be on this call. Back to you, Chris.
All right. Now, the people everyone came to see. Let's talk about these gentlemen. First, Mahesh Baxi. He is our co-founder and CEO at Provus, a proven leader with over 20 years in the quote-to-cash domain. Passionate about solving complex enterprise business problems and obsessed with customer success. Mahesh is a serial entrepreneur, a visionary, brings a wealth of experience in the services quoting domain. He's also a published author, an avid speaker, and an amateur Bollywood singer. And then we have Joe Longo. Joe is a PSA principal at Oracle NetSuite. He works with NetSuite customers to help them run more efficient and profitable projects and services organizations. He adopted his first instance of OpenAir PSA in 2001, as he just said, where he discovered the power PSA brings to services organizations and has been a leader in the field ever since. He is also a published author and an avid cyclist. And I say all this because I want you to understand when we're talking about services practitioners and leaders, there's nobody better than these two gentlemen. And just to prove it, if you had any doubts about their credentials, both Joe and Mahesh are contributing authors and have helped literally write the book on professional services leadership. Tips from the trenches. If you are curious about this, you want a copy, let us know and we can get you a copy after the webinar. All right. So that's it from introduction standpoint. You didn't come here to see me talk. Let's start talking with Joe and Mahesh. Let's start the conversation. And so we're going to start at the beginning. All right, Mahesh, let's talk about your experience as a services practitioner, and also if you can share a little bit about what you learned from your times in the trenches.
Thank you, Chris. That's a great question. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time. So I've been in the industry close to 30 years now. Most of my professional life has been spent in front of customers solving really complex enterprise business problems. Now, I've solved those problems either working for product companies and implementing that product for those customers, or running a services company such as ThoughtWorks, where we undertake the entire implementation of end-to-end solutions, or create a greenfield solution for the customers, right? But at the end of the day, as Chris mentioned earlier, super obsessed about customer success and super obsessed about solving a complex enterprise business problems. Now, In 30 years, I think it's hard to summarize in a few bullet points, but here is my learning so far, from these experiences, right? One, whether you are a services company, whether you are a product company, whether you are consuming services, whether you are providing services, I think number one thing is the implementation phase or professional services phase in that entire customer lifecycle journey is one of the most difficult and delicate phases in that journey, right? And we'll talk more about why it's one of the most difficult and delicate phases as we go along. And the second is really balancing the scope, the resources, the right kind of resources, a profitability, and all of that combined with making sure that customer referenceability, stays on is an extremely hard, ask from the teams who are actually doing this on the ground. And third is really, these days it's all about ROI. It's all about the value realization. So now you think of, when the rubber hits the road from a services or implementation team perspective, you are not only balancing your scope, resources, profitability, all of that stuff, but now you are really supposed to implement your product or the services that you have signed up for in such a way that customer gets the most ROI without really pissing them off with a whole bunch of change orders. And that itself is a constant uphill battle, right? And in essence, everyone wants to kind of make money, not lose money, and everyone wants to be profitable. And that's really a hard ask on anyone.
Yeah, I like that. And 30 years, I want to call special attention to a keyword that you just said multiple times there, and it's the customer. Everything comes back to the customer. If you're not thinking that way, then you're not paying attention to 30 years of experience. Joe, how about yourself? Let's talk about your experience as a services practitioner, as a leader, scaling, and some of your experiences in the trenches as well.
Yeah, obviously, I agree with Mahesh. He has a lot more experience than me because he's a lot older than me, obviously. But no, I've got more than 30 years. So, but everything you said, Mahesh, is absolutely right. Working with the customer, turning the dials for profitability versus customer satisfaction, all those good things. But there's the other side of it. And I want to reference something that Thomas Lau once said. The VP of Professional Services is the most service-oriented person in the company, and yet he's heavily maligned. And why is that? Well, in the back office, who we're dealing with apart from the customers, are so many organizations within our own companies, starting with the sales organization that got us a deal to begin with. Then there's the engineering organization as, hey, what are you doing to my product? And of course, there's finance and accounting that are always concerned about how much money you're spending. Each one of those groups can be a silo. And what I found the hard way in the early days of my career is that if you try and manage each one of those individually, you create all these friction points. And let's just talk about sales. And the funny thing about this is I used to be a services guy working with sales. Now I'm a sales guy working with services here at NetSuite. I'll just cut to the chase. What solved those silos for us was bringing in solutions. We're trying to do things with spreadsheets, trying to do things with meetings, but once we had an enterprise solution, and obviously that was open air for me in my career, and we got everybody involved, the engineering people and the sales people and accounting, and they could all see, they all had visibility. In fact, we even gave them some authority in the system. Those silos started to break down. And why is that important? Because so much emotional energy goes into working with your own colleagues, explaining to the CFO, what your forecast is. You have to leave a little bit over for the customer. So as soon as you remove that friction internally and everybody's on the same page, then your efforts with the customer is magnified. And the customers see that. I mean, they can read your body language. So totally agree with Mahesh. There's the customer facing side. For me, the focus was also the internal side.
And how do you recognize inside you're in the fray, you're in the trenches? Sometimes you don't take a moment to pop up and realize we've got silos everywhere. This is hurting us. This is hurting our customers. What are some signals you see for somebody who might be in the trenches right now, they should take a look and understand where their major friction points are?
You want me to say that, Mahesh?
Yeah, please go ahead.
The very first one, yeah, the very first one, and I could tell you great war stories. is where there's this argument over how you price the deal. And I mean, seriously. So here's what I like to say, right? You can go into a services, what I call a deal, an engagement where you may be making money, where you may be breaking even on the services piece, not on the software, or where you may be even losing a bit because the company is investing. That's okay. It's absolutely okay. Maybe losing money because the customer is, your company is trying to do a land grab in a particular space. What's not okay is getting into that engagement and then finding out after the fact as a trailing indicator that you're losing money on this. That's not okay, because people get on your back right away. So the way the very first, to answer your question, Chris, one of the first red flags is, well, you had this argument with the salespeople and the VP of sales. Why is your engagement so expensive? I'm trying to sell them software. There's a problem right there. You're not on the same page. And like I keep saying, is once you have a system and you can show them, well, this is how I scoped it. What would you like me to take out? What do you think we should do? Let's go to the CEO and decide if we want to make this a loss leader. Knowing ahead of time what the project accounting is going to look like is so crucial for everybody in the company. That was one of my red flags.
Yeah. And to build on that, Joe, you're absolutely bang on, right? I think that there are all those red flags, and what we call it as, that integration between the front office and the middle office, right? So at Provus, we solve that middle office problem, which is, if you probably have figured out how to execute your projects and track your projects and stuff like that. And most customers are more mature in that regard. Most customers are absolutely mature when it comes to front office in terms of how you track your opportunity, how you track your forecasting from a product perspective and all that. Where customers are struggling with is what we call the middle office, which is, how do you make sure that you are estimating, scoping, and quoting your proposals, your projects accurately? And not only accurately, how do you make sure it's repeatable? You talked about, it's okay to lose money as long as you know it, but most customers lose money not knowing it, right? And they lose money because there's just no repeatable, accurate process to know what is the scope, how you are going to implement, what kind of resources do you need, where are these resources going to come from, and everything is afterthought, right? And this is where the sales and services handshake is so important, because sales is busy selling what they are supposed to do, and once the deal is done, the rubber hits the road, and guess what? The during the kickoff, the conversations that services team ends up having is, oh, we did not know that was in the scope. Oh, well, this is not in the scope, and hence it's a change order. Now, all of a sudden, you are creating a very, very suboptimal customer experience, right? And so while we think of this entire process as lead to cash process, I think connecting that dot from middle office to the back office, as you call it, I think that is absolutely transformative. That is absolutely the need of the hour for all of the enterprise businesses like yesterday. And unfortunately, we run into more and more customers who are still kind of sitting on so-called Excel spreadsheet-based processes, which is, first of all, not a process, nor it's a tool, nor it's a system, right? But that's the reality.
Mahesh, and let me build off that last comment. People feel that they're using spreadsheets to communicate. I found, and this is a life story, spreadsheets just create friction within the organization. I remember so well my COO coming up and saying, well, why did you price this project this way? And I show him. And then he went over to one of his friends and he had the same project priced in a different format and the different number came out. He says, well, I prefer his. How do you handle that, right? So as soon as you automate that, as soon as you remove, well, just Excel and bring in a system, what we found, and again, a professional life story, what we found is all the arguments went away. People believe that your system is, it's been audited. It may not be accurate to 2 decimal places, but your system is transparent and it's correct. Arguments have disappeared. And the way I said this, the way I implemented this, I actually gave the salespeople licenses and accounts within OpenAir. They could see what we were doing. And in fact, at the very end, they were authorizing, they were approving the invoices. With respect to the customer, what was really interesting about this is we used to send out spreadsheets for the timesheets, and you get calls right away. Well, there's a mistake here and a mistake there. Once we automated that and got rid of spreadsheets, no calls from customers ever. They just believed there was a system there. So if I had to be prescriptive, Mahesh, and we're like 16 minutes into this webinar, I just want to, there's one takeaway, or there's three takeaways. The only things you remember are document your methodology so it's repeatable. So you have guardrails around your consultants. Document the process for that methodology. What are the gates to go from step 1 to step 2? And finally, bring in a system to manage all that, starting with the quotation process. That is so key.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
I like that. I like, Joe, you brought up something really important about systems and methodologies and transparency. And transparency isn't just being open to call somebody on the phone and collaborate. Right? Like transparency can take form in technology, transparency can take form in the way you communicate with each other, transparency can take form in all kinds of different ways. So really focus on delivering those layers of transparency in multiple ways, not just in a, here's the weekly report. Very cool. So what I want to do right now is I want to transition to the audience a little bit and really focus in on this sales and delivery handshake that Mahesh brought up and what we've just been talking about, and get the audience perspective. So we're going to bring a poll up onto the screen and ask about it. Whether talk about this alignment with your sales or services counterparts. And I want to get your understand from everybody here, what is your biggest challenge right now when it comes to that handshake agreement, from breaking down those silos? Lack of visibility into pipeline, not involved early enough in the deal and scoping process, incomplete or error-filled project intake forms. Maybe your deal structures aren't being sold that put too much pressure on margins, and then you can't deliver a great project, or just a lack of communication, collaboration. And of course, there is the bailout. Everything is just hard, right? So we'll give everyone a couple about a minute to do this, and in the meantime, Mahesh, let's go ahead and get your perspective on what are some signals of strong alignment, right? Like we know a little bit how to get there, transparency, connect our systems, and then once those things start happening, what can organizations expect to feel and see internally?
Yeah, that's a great question, right? I mean, a strong a kind of strong handshake, or we talk about people, process, and tools, right? And I think no matter how much you spend on kind of process and tool, the people part you cannot ignore, and which is a mistake that most enterprises make. When it comes to people, we are not talking about only the internal organization, which is your sales and services. We are talking about the key aspect of the people part, which is customer. So some of these indications of a good handshake / good process / well thought through kind of whether it's an automation in some form or fashion or not, but is really in the services business, the scope is the foundation for everything that you do, right? And if your first meeting with the customer after the sales is done is, hey, here is the scope that we have all agreed on in the process over last, whatever, 4, 5 months, 6 months in the sales process. And everyone goes, yep, that's it. That's exactly what we need. That's exactly what we agreed on. That's exactly what we discussed. We agree what's not in the scope, all of that stuff. That's a big sign and a great way to, begin your relationship when it comes to, services perspective, right? The second one is that, very quickly, it comes down to making sure that the enthusiasm that has been built in the sales process continues, right? And we have seen, I'm preaching to the choir here, but we have seen that, everyone is super excited about, what's coming in the sales process, but that enthusiasm kind of starts to slow down and kind of, go lower as the process continues. Now, if you have sold this correctly, if everyone has understood what's the value realization and ROI from what you are implementing, whether it's a middle office like Provus or whether it's a back office like OpenAir, I think that enthusiasm should continue, and that continues when everyone understands the importance, the value realization, and ROI that they're going to get, right? And the third is really, making sure that, I mean, change order is an inevitable process, but what you don't want to come out of kickoff is, throw a whole bunch of change orders at the customer and say, well, sorry, this was not in the scope, or this is something that you are asking extra and stuff like that, right? So making sure that that journey starts on the right path is absolutely key, because if it doesn't, then it's an extremely uphill battle for the services organizations to really get the customer back to the kind of happiness quotient slash referenceability quotient, right? So that's what I would say you need to watch out for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the customer as well, right? They want to stay excited. And I've been on the other side as a customer before and gotten past a really heavy phase. And as a customer, you're asking for budget, right? You're going to your organizations and you're asking for large sums of money, most likely, to make something happen. And for a kickoff meeting to say, like, go ask for more money, oh, it hurts. It hurts really bad. All right. So let's go ahead and close this poll, and let's take a look at the responses. So they'll come up here in just a moment. All right, let's show these responses. All right, so most prevalent across this audience is deal structures are being sold that put too much pressure on margins. Joe, what kind of advice or tips can you give to the audience that kind of help alleviate this pressure?
We could have a webinar on that alone. I alluded to it earlier, which is, what is the corporate model? What is their charter? If you're an early stage startup, you're probably going to lose money on every deal, right? As you start to mature, and I've been with companies that we took public, suddenly the board starts asking, why don't you have those money? Okay. So in the end, it's getting everybody in agreement as to what should be the margin on this particular project. So I'll be very specific. If one company, we closed a deal with the Federal Reserve Bank. How exciting is that? Federal Reserve Bank. We're really on the right page here. Should we be making a big margin on the services piece of it, or shouldn't we? Well, go back in time. What was the chart of the company then? It was trying to go public. And one of the pain points, by the way, and getting back to what Mahesh was saying, is the statement of work. Nothing slows down a deal better than a broken statement of work. So you've done all the sales cycle, you've done the demos, you've done the ROI, the customer's about to sign, but they, okay, that's the license piece. They need to know the cost of the statement of work. And they get the statement of work they've never seen before. It's got typos in it. It's got paragraphs on the last customer. May even have the previous customer's name there. And then the whole sales cycle starts again. Being able to automate that is going to remove one of the biggest speed bumps in just closing the deal. Step number one. Step number two, when your team sees that, the deployment team understands the statement of work. I've always said to my teams, the selling doesn't end when the customer signs. The selling continues when you go on site that very first meeting, or these days you do it remotely, and you get excitement based on what's in the statement of work. This is what we all agreed to do. This is what we're going to do. This is what you're going to see. You're going to have pride of ownership. So that continues through. So one of the big focal points is the SOW. And I'm going to come clean here, guys. I didn't use Provus because it didn't exist when I had Open Air. Where were you, Mahesh? But what I've seen in Provus that really knocked my socks off, it spits out an SOW. I'm not going to call it AI. That's up to you, Mahesh.
Yep.
If I ever went back into running services, that would be a must-have for me. Getting the statement of work right, making sure everybody understands what the margins are going to be, what the deliverables are, and continuing that momentum.
You are absolutely bang on, Joe. So I'm going to build up on that. By the way, Chris, there is an ask if you can bring back the results of the poll. I don't know if that's possible, but if so, please do it.
Yep.
So I think building on what you said, Joe, right? There are many reasons why the deal structures are being sold that put too much pressure on margins, and that's a very well thought through answer, or the option that we had put it out there, right? And not only that there is a pressure on margins, but the irony of this thing is when you are actually quoting, you just don't know what you are selling and what kind of pressure it's going to create on the margins. And there is absolutely no learnings from the historical data because yes, everything could be beautifully captured in your back office. You are tracking the project because tracking the project becomes important because ultimately that's generating the invoice and that's generating the money. So you want to capture the timesheets, and on back of timesheets, you want to capture how you are doing against your work breakdown structure. But all of that feeding into, hey, are you selling better or are you just selling what you are used to selling? And the answer is, hey, I'm just selling what I'm used to selling. That could be templatized in the Excel form. That could be just somebody's tribal knowledge in their head and all of that kind of stuff. So the key to reduce that pressure on the margin is really understand, have you scoped everything that you are supposed to scope? Have you accurately scoped it? Is there any learnings? Like if you continue to estimate integration phase as an example for 150 hours, but is there any feedback coming saying that, hey, you are estimating at 150 hours, but you always spend 350 hours. So either remove that phase or change that estimation, because all of that puts pressure on, when the execution starts, all of that puts pressure on the margins and how you kind of put the resources allocations. And again, coming back to suboptimal customer experience, it's all about customer experience these days, right?
All right, so we don't have a ton of time left, but there's a couple of really important pieces of the conversation that we want to get to, and it's asking about technology in this process, right? We have two technology leaders as well as process leaders. So what are some real important areas of focus when it comes to your technology strategy in these processes? And let's go ahead and start with Mahesh there.
Okay, so I'll be brief. I know we are kind of going to run out of time here, but that's what happens with Joe and I, because we go long back. We have known each other for like 17 years now, 18 years. But it's fantastic. I mean, these discussions are really good, and I think we are seeing the transformation happening in the form of that middle office to back office and how customers consume these services or these products. But going back to your question, Chris, it's really, I think number one, you need to really think through how you're going to organize and acquire the data. And the data I'm talking about is when it comes to how you are selling. That's your scoping, that's your estimation, that's your quoting, all of the scenarios that you use, all of the resource mix that you use, the locations of those resources, the work breakdown structure, all of that, right? All of that you are probably tracking in your backend system if you have automated your backend system back office through OpenAir. But how do you bring that forward and make sure that you are utilizing all of that effectively in the middle office, right? And then we have this strategy, we call it D square P square strategy, which is descriptive, diagnostics, predictive, and prescriptive. We don't have time to go into that. That's a webinar by itself, as Joe said. But I think only if you are thinking, or if you have automated your services coding process, which is fully integrated with your PSS systems such as OpenAir, you are going to be able to use a strategy such as our D square P square to be able to not only see what you are selling, but get the recommendations based on your past historic data to say that, hey, here is your recommended scenario, here is why, here is what you should sell, here is your win probability. And on back of all of that, what you get is a very powerful mechanism to do your resource and revenue forecasting when it comes to services. This is number one pain point across the leadership of services and sales, where they are not able to accurately predict the resource and revenue forecast. So that would be my take on that technology.
Great. How about you, Joe?
That's huge, Mahesh. Look, we've been talking with what I call trailing indicators. This is our history. Let me tell you what's coming for all of us: AI. And I know, look, it's an overused term, but I'll give you two data points. I gave a talk at the TSIA conference back in September, the Technology Services Industry Association, And I saw all the other vendors there were letting AI bleed into their products, including myself, because NetSuite has already announced that we're going to incorporate AI into OpenAir in a future release. It's public knowledge. Okay, that was, again, a trailing indicator. The next TSIA conference in Orlando, the theme is AI. This is for services. And you go, okay, well, how's AI going to help with services? It's exactly what you just said, Mahesh. It's going to be a predictor for you with respect to your resources, your risks, your timelines in all sorts of ways. And again, that is a topic in and of itself. The second validation point I have around letting AI get into your lives with either something like Provus or OpenAir resource management or so forth is what I've heard from my friends at Google. They're just 11 miles up the road. I know people there. Of course, they're big into AI. They believe that in the immediate future, within the next year or so, if you need to have AI as your skill set, using the AI tool your company is going to adopt, so that you can just get your job done. That's going to be almost a requirement these days. So looking ahead, my message to the folks on this call is get out of the spreadsheets, adopt the best technology you can find. Hopefully it's OpenAir, build my career around it, and be ready for AI coming into those sorts of tools to drive your business forward. It's going to be a must. Thank you.
Yeah,
Love it.
and to build on that, Chris, my three key takeaways. The first one is a common, which is, spreadsheet is not a system or a scalable strategy. So if you're on spreadsheets, you need to move off of it like now, right? Like 2024 is just beginning, so you better plan for moving off of spreadsheets if you want to scale your business. Number two, if you want to really get anywhere closer to your competitors who are automating your processes, they're automating, the entire lead to cash process when it comes to services. I think, a spend for automation like Provus plus OpenAir, I think it has to be in your plan. I mean, if it's not, I think you really need to relook at that and see what you can do. But what that will allow you to do is really acquire and organize your data in a meaningful way and not in an Excel spreadsheet way that you cannot do any learnings from. And the third, which is most important on back of the first two that I just said, is AI is and will bring transformative changes to your business, which means that, it will allow you to really stay competitive. It will allow you to really position your deals, not only to win, but also to maximize your revenue and optimize your margin. Without that, you are just going deal after deal and not learning anything from the past, nor using the technologies such as AI to tell you what you should be doing, right? So those are my three key takeaways for the audience here.
I love that. And before we wrap it up, Joe, any last parting thoughts or advice?
Basically, something we left out, that book, Tips from the Trenches, 2 chapters I would direct you all to is chapter 2, which is on human capital, basically HR. And there's another chapter on selling services. These are usually the areas that the services people have difficulty with. Grab an electronic copy of that, read that, lots of good nuggets in there for you. And just like Mahesh said, please get out of the spreadsheet world. Thank you.
Spreadsheet world. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mahesh, Joe. We appreciate your time. We appreciate everybody else's time showing up. If you want to see more of NetSuite OpenAir and Provus service quoting in action, there is a pre-recorded webinar on provusinc.com featuring Jeff Chandler, PSA account executive from Oracle NetSuite, and Mahesh, who you know very well. So go ahead and visit provusinc.com to see that. And with that, what we're going to do is say thank you for your time. We will send out the recording for everybody. And remember, spreadsheets are not a system. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.